They laughed at her worn shoes. They mocked her silence. They called her just a cleaner. She kept her head down, gripping the mop like it was the only thing keeping her steady. No one noticed the way her hands trembled or the way her eyes quietly observed every face in that room. Then the CEO slowly stood up. His voice cut through the laughter. "Look at her, look very well." The room fell silent, because in that moment, no one realized that the woman they ignored for years was about to shatter their power and expose a truth that would leave them speechless. Mama Efuna arrived before sunrise, when the city was still half asleep and the building lights glowed like distant stars. She moved quietly through the corridors, her footsteps soft, her presence barely noticed. By the time the executives arrived in tailored suits and polished shoes, every desk sparkled, but the woman who made it happen might as well have been invisible. She cleaned boardrooms where million-dollar decisions were made, where voices rose and fell with power and ego. They spoke freely around her, as if she were part of the furniture. Contracts were discussed. Secrets were shared. Jokes were cracked, often at her expense. Her accent became a punchline. Her faded uniform, a reason to smirk. Her silence, an invitation to disrespect. Some didn't even bother lowering their voices. To them, silence meant ignorance. They assumed she didn't understand. They assumed she didn't matter. But Mama Efuna heard everything. She heard the arrogance, the lies, the quiet cruelty hidden behind corporate smiles. And while they laughed, she simply nodded and kept working, her eyes calm, her face unreadable. What none of them understood was this. Her silence was never weakness. It was patience. Long before she pushed a cleaning cart through silent hallways, Mama Efuna sat at tables just like these. Only then, the chairs were leather, the air smelled of fresh ambition, and people leaned forward when she spoke. She was there at the beginning, when the company was nothing more than an idea sketched on napkins and late-night promises. Back when risk lived in every decision and belief mattered more than titles. Mama Efuna didn't just attend those meetings, she shaped them. She questioned weak plans, strengthened bold ones, and saw potential where others saw uncertainty. She invested more than money. She invested her savings, everything she had carefully built over years of sacrifice. She invested her trust, believing that partnership meant loyalty. She invested her future, imagining a legacy that would outlive her. The company grew, slowly at first, then rapidly. Offices expanded, profits multiplied, power shifted, and as success arrived, so did something darker. The conversations changed. Her ideas were repeated by others, louder and suddenly praised. Her concerns were brushed aside as emotional. Meetings she once led slowly stopped including her. Documents went unsigned. Emails went unanswered. Her name, once printed proudly on early paperwork, began disappearing. Then came the betrayal. It wasn't loud. Betrayals like that never are. It happened behind closed doors, inside legal language she trusted too easily. A signature placed where loyalty once stood. A restructuring that quietly erased her ownership. A narrative rewritten so cleanly that when she protested, she sounded like a stranger to her own creation. By the time she understood what had happened, it was already over. Her shares were gone. Her position vanished. Her voice dismissed. They called it business. But business had taken her life. The legal battle drained what little she had left. Friends she once trusted avoided her calls. Former partners crossed the street to avoid eye contact. The same people who once praised her vision now treated her like a problem that needed to disappear. And eventually, she did. Mama Efuna lost her home. She lost her standing. She lost the respect she thought she had earned. What she didn't lose was her memory. She remembered every deal discussed before it ever made the news. Every shortcut taken. Every secret buried beneath polished presentations. She remembered names, dates, numbers, details others forgot once they climbed high enough to believe they were untouchable. When survival became her only focus, she took the job no one else wanted. Cleaning floors, emptying trash, scrubbing away the evidence of power at the end of each day. And fate, quiet, patient fate, placed her back inside the very building she once helped create. At first, it hurt. Every hallway echoed with ghosts of who she used to be. Every office reminded her of promises broken. But over time, pain hardened into clarity. She listened. Executives talked when they thought no one important was around. They bragged. They complained. They confessed mistakes they assumed would never surface. They laughed about cutting corners and silencing dissent. They spoke of ethics as a branding tool, not a value. And Mama Efuna remembered everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She didn't expose them. Not yet. Because she understood something they never had. Power shouts, but truth waits. Her silence became her shield. Her invisibility, her advantage. While they saw a poor cleaner, she saw patterns. While they mocked her accent, she calculated consequences. While they believed she was broken, she was rebuilding, piece by piece, quietly, patiently. Every night, she went home to a small room and wrote things down. Dates, names, decisions, evidence no one thought to hide from someone they didn't respect. They thought she had lost everything. But memory, unlike power, never forgets. And one day soon, it would remember them, out loud. The laughter started the moment Mama Efuna entered the boardroom. It wasn't loud at first, just quiet snickers, exchanged glances, the kind of smiles people wear when they believe no one important is watching. Someone muttered a joke about wrong room. Another whispered something about budgets being so bad they'd started inviting cleaners to executive meetings. Mama Efuna said nothing. She stood near the door, mop still in her hand, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes steady. She had been told to clean after the meeting ended, but the assistant, nervous, pale, had asked her to wait inside instead. No explanation, just a request. The executives took their seats. Laptops opened. Coffee was poured. The room buzzed with confidence and cruelty, the kind that grows when people believe they are untouchable. Then the CEO walked in. The room snapped to attention. He didn't smile. He didn't sit. He scanned the room slowly, deliberately, faces full of power, pride, and assumption. His gaze lingered on the laughter that hadn't quite faded, on the smugness still clinging to the air. And then he spoke. Enough. One word. Calm. Heavy. The laughter died instantly. No one dared breathe. The CEO turned, not toward the executives, not toward the screen, but toward Mama Efuna. Please, he said, his voice steady. Step forward. Confusion rippled across the room. Chairs shifted, brows furrowed. A few people chuckled nervously, assuming this was some kind of test, some leadership exercise they didn't yet understand. Mama Efuna hesitated for just a moment. Not out of fear, but out of memory. Then she walked to the front of the room. Every step echoed, louder than the laughter that had mocked her moments earlier. The mop remained behind, leaning against the wall like a symbol of the role they had assigned her, and the truth they had ignored. The CEO faced the room again. Most of you, he said, have worked here less than 10 years. Some less than 5. You believe you know this company. You believe you understand its history. He paused. You don't. A few executives exchanged uneasy glances. This company, he continued, was not built by the loudest voices in this room. It was built by people whose names were erased before you ever arrived. He turned back to Mama Efuna. Tell them, he said gently. Tell them a truth that's been buried for 15 years. Silence swallowed the room whole. Mama Efuna looked around. Faces she had cleaned around for years stared back at her now, some confused, some annoyed, some suddenly afraid. Men and women who had mocked her accent, her posture, her silence. She inhaled slowly. My name, she said, her voice soft but unwavering, is Efuna Becky. A few people stiffened. I was here, she continued, before this building had glass walls, before your bonuses, before your titles. Someone laughed, short, disbelieving. The CEO didn't look at them. I helped design the first operational model, Mama Efuna said. I secured the early investors. I signed documents that no longer carry my name. The air changed. She spoke calmly, carefully, naming dates, meetings, decisions that only insiders could know. She recalled conversations that had never been recorded. Deals struck before emails replaced handshakes. One executive's face drained of color. Another leaned back slowly, as if distance could protect him. "You trusted me," she said, her eyes settling on one man in particular. "You asked me to sign. You said it was temporary. You said it was for protection." Her voice didn't shake. "You lied." The CEO stepped aside, allowing a screen behind him to light up. Documents appeared. Early contracts. Original investment records. Emails recovered, archived, ignored for years. Her name, once crossed out, stood clear and undeniable. Gasps filled the room. One by one, the jokes turned into panic. "You let me disappear," Mama Efuna said. "And when I fought back, you called it business. You call me difficult. You call me replaceable." She looked down briefly, then back up. "So I became invisible." No one laughed now. "For 15 years," she continued, "I listened. I remembered. I watched the same patterns repeat. The same shortcuts. The same silence used as a weapon." The CEO spoke again. "Everything she has said," he announced, "has been verified." The room erupted, not with sound but with fear. Hands trembled. Throats tightened. People who once commanded entire departments couldn't meet her eyes. "She never came back for revenge," the CEO added. "She came back for truth." Mama Efuna folded her hands. "I didn't want your seats," she said quietly. "I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted what was taken to be seen." She paused. "But justice," she added, "has its own timing." The CEO nodded. "Effective immediately," he said. "There will be a full investigation. Restitution. Public correction of records. And consequences." Some stared at the table. Others stared at her. The woman they had mocked. The cleaner they had ignored. The founder they had erased. Mama Efuna took one step back. In that moment, power shifted. Not because she raised her voice, but because truth finally did. And in the silence that followed, everyone in that boardroom understood something they never had before. The most powerful person in the room had never needed to announce herself. She had simply waited. The screen behind the CEO didn't go dark. Instead, it changed. Emails began to appear. Threads stretching back years, some marked confidential, others flagged and buried deep in archives no one expected to be reopened. Conversations that were once whispered in hallways now sat exposed in black and white. Jokes about cutting corners. Instructions to keep this off the record. Decisions that traded integrity for profit. Then came the bank records. Account numbers. Transfer dates. Shell companies registered under distant names. Money moving quietly, deliberately, away from shareholders, away from ethics, away from anyone who might ask questions. The numbers were precise, unforgiving, impossible to deny. The room transformed. What had once been filled with laughter now held only panic. Chairs scraped softly as executives shifted uncomfortably. One man loosened his tie, his hands trembling despite his effort to appear calm. A woman who had once mocked Mama Efuna's uniform stared fixedly at her notepad, as if avoiding eye contact could erase the past. No one laughed now. No one whispered jokes. They couldn't even look at her. The CEO spoke again, his voice controlled but heavy. "This isn't a presentation. This is evidence." The word evidence landed like a verdict. Mama Efuna stood quietly to the side, not triumphant, not angry, just present. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, recognizing faces, some she had cleaned around for years, some newer, some older. She remembered them all. The man who had once laughed at her accent while signing off on fraudulent transfers. The woman who had dismissed her with a wave, then forwarded emails instructing others to delete records. The executive who bragged loudly about being untouchable while quietly routing money into hidden accounts. They had underestimated her. They had assumed the person emptying their trash could not understand the value of what they threw away. That the woman mopping the floor could not read the words scrolling across their screens. They were wrong. They had mistaken silence for blindness. But Mama Efuna had seen everything. She had seen the way power protected itself, the way unethical decisions were dressed up as strategy. The way people convinced themselves that if no one spoke up, nothing was wrong. And she had remembered every name. The CEO stepped forward, his tone sharp now. Some of you are wondering how this information was collected. No one answered. She didn't hack anything, he said. She didn't steal. You gave it to her. A murmur rippled through the room. You spoke freely, he continued, because you believed she didn't matter. Because you believed silence meant stupidity. Mama Efyuna finally spoke. You talked, she said softly, because you never saw me. Her words carried more weight than shouting ever could. I cleaned your offices, she continued. I emptied your bins. I wiped fingerprints off tables after decisions you never expected to face again. She paused, letting the truth settle. You underestimated me, she said, not accusing, stating a fact. And in doing so, you exposed yourselves. One executive finally looked up, his voice breaking. Why didn't you say something sooner? Mama Efyuna met his gaze. Because no one listens, she said, until they are forced to. The room fell into a deeper silence. Legal counsel entered quietly and took seats along the wall. Phones buzzed with messages that went unread. Careers, once built on arrogance, began collapsing in real time. Outside the glass walls, the city moved on, unaware that an empire was cracking from the inside. The CEO turned to Mama Efyuna. History, he said, will remember who built this company and who tried to destroy it. She nodded, not in victory, but in closure. For years, power had spoken loudly while truth waited patiently. Now, truth stood in the center of the room, and power had nowhere left to hide. By morning, the building no longer felt the same. Security lights flashed where arrogance once stood tall. Investigators walked the same halls Mama Efyuna had cleaned for years, now collecting evidence instead of ignoring it. Quiet phone calls turned into official statements. Some offices remained locked. Others were emptied in silence. Arrests were made. Lies that had survived for years collapsed overnight, unable to stand once truth finally demanded space. News outlets spoke of corporate misconduct and historic corrections, but inside those walls, everyone knew it was more than that. It was accountability. By sunrise, the company released a statement correcting its own history. Names were restored, records amended, and at the center of it all stood Mama Efyuna, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. She was publicly acknowledged as a founding partner. Her shares were returned, her role documented, her contributions finally spoken aloud without hesitation or denial. The same boardroom that once laughed at her now stood in silence as her name was etched back into the company's story. But Mama Efyuna did not smile in triumph. She did not demand apologies. She did not celebrate revenge. When reporters asked her how it felt to win, she gently corrected them. This is not about winning, she said. It is about dignity. She spoke of respect, how it should never be tied to titles, accents, or the clothes someone wears to earn a living. She reminded the world that power often hides behind appearances, and that humanity disappears the moment we decide someone matters less. A uniform, she said, never defines a human being. Employees listen differently now, some with regret, some with tears, many with a new understanding they had never been forced to confront before. Mama Efyuna chose not to return to an executive office. Instead, she helped restructure the company's values, ensuring transparency, protection for workers, and systems that would never again silence those without power. She had moved from invisible to unbreakable, not because she sought dominance, but because she refused to let truth remain buried. And in doing so, she changed more than a company. She changed the way people saw the woman holding the mop. They mocked a cleaner, and in doing so, revealed who they truly were. She stayed silent, not because she was weak, but because truth grows stronger with time, because power shouts to be noticed, but dignity waits to be undeniable. And sometimes, the person everyone looks down on isn't invisible at all. They're carrying the truth, quietly, patiently, until the moment it rises and changes everything.